Can you hear me? Okay. If I could have everyone's attention for a moment. If I could ask you to find a seat. I know this is a great example of what happens when you bring together groups with valuable and valued differences as well as community. I want to welcome you. My name is Carola Weil. I'm the Dean of the School of Professional and Extended Studies here at American University, and we are the new home of the Intercultural Management Institute. And I am so delighted to welcome each and every one of you. I wished we could run this conference for at least a week. Just based on the two panels that I heard this morning, I think we have enough fodder for conversation and discussion to last us many lifetimes. Unfortunately, we all have places to go and people to see. And most importantly, though, this is an opportunity for us to really think about what is the future of intercultural management, what is the future of cultural competence. It is a question that clearly universities are grappling with by the hour, as some of us know. And it certainly is hitting us where we live in many different ways. Before I introduce our keynote speaker for today, I want to just say a few words about why would a School of Professional and Extended Studies care about intercultural management. Now, for most of you, I think the answer is self-evident. But it is part of our mandate, which is that we want to be employer responsive. We want to provide employer-relevant, innovative education and training opportunities. And what is it that employers have found? They need cultural competence. They need to be able to connect across all kinds of boundaries. And so one of our missions is, in fact, to train connectors, to train the translators. And I don't mean translation necessarily in the linguistic sense, although that can often help as well. But as we learned earlier today, even just thinking about how do we translate across different population groups? How do we translate across disciplines? What does it take for an engineer to be able to communicate effectively with a social scientist? What does it take for someone who is in international business and marketing to be able to think about healthcare and the health and well-being of their employees? So it is that kind of intersectional training and work that we have already been doing at the school. And we were delighted to have the opportunity this past summer to adopt the Intercultural Management Institute. And I want to just encourage all of you, invite all of you to be part of the next generation of IMI. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to Gary Weaver and to our advisory council who have steered us along a path that shows that this is the future. This really is where we need to be spending more of our energies. So I want to thank also our sponsors who have helped make this possible. There is no free lunch, as we all know. Some of us have to work for our lunch by speaking, and others have supported us very generously. In particular, DFA International, DwellWorks, thank you very much. Aperian Global, ETS TOEFL, as well as the Graduate School USA. And if you did not have a chance to swing by some of the exhibit tables in Ward in the other building, I would encourage you to stop by there as well. I also would like to thank each of our panelists and moderators and speakers, as well as the advisory council members who were able to join us today. As I said, we have enough food here, food for thought for a lifetime. Unfortunately, we had to compact it into a very short period of time. A special thank you goes to my colleagues, the IMI staff, Maria Pekala, who's the interim director of IMI. Haley Kalin, Assistant Director for Programs, and our new program coordinator and newest member, also a student here, Heidi Rowe. Whereas Heidi is in the back there waving. As well as all of my colleagues from the School of Professional and Extended Studies. If you haven't met any of them, please find one in the room, talk to them. They are always eager to make new connections and new friends. But thank you all. It is now my pleasure to introduce our speaker of note, John Zogby. I was just saying to John that I actually met him when we were both in elementary school, but it's been a while. It's not true, but we met several decades ago. And at the time, he was doing pioneering work on the Middle East conflicts, and was actually one of the first people to say, gee, we should actually ask what people think and what they want to know, because that might help us come up with better solutions. Alas, we're still grappling with some of those issues many years later, but John clearly had a tremendous impact on work that was being done in the field. He is the founder of Zogby Poll and Zogby Companies, internationally respected pollster, an opinion leader, and best-selling author. Clearly a very busy man in this primary season, and I'm sure someone will want to ask you what you think of the election campaigns, but we will let you out of the room before you have to answer those questions. I heard recently that he has accepted a new appointment as director of the Keenan Center for Entrepreneurship at Le Moyne College's Madden School of Business. We congratulate you on that. Some of you may be familiar with his first book called The First Globals, Understanding, Managing, and Unleashing Our Millennial Generation, in which he explored how millennials, or as he termed them, the first globals, are more globally aware and sensitive, how they want to make their workplace and planet a better place, and how we can begin to understand them. Today, however, John Zogby is going to speak with us about his new book. And in fact, we have copies of it available for purchase. It is literally hot off the press. The ink is still drying. It is called We Are Many, We Are One, Neo-Tribes and Tribal Analytics in the 21st Century America, Just to give you coming attractions from the book, space and geography, demographics and culture are less and less relevant. It is no longer about where people are born or where they live. It is more about who they are, how they see themselves, and with whom they choose to identify. This new world is as much about how we choose to identify ourselves, how we define our priorities, and who we ourselves choose as our cohort, as it is about where we physically work, play, and worship. Couldn't have said it better myself. And so, without further ado, please join me in welcoming John Zogby. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for the invitation, the wonderful introduction, and for hyping my new book. During the course of this, I'm going to suggest some books for reading, and the only difference is I do think you should read the books that I recommend, but this is one instance where I just want you to buy my book. So I'm going to do two things, actually, because I think really relevant to this conference is the work that I've done on First Globals, on millennials. I've been researching millennials now for 13 years, have defined in many ways ahead of the curve how different they are, not only in the United States, but worldwide. There are global citizens who connect as an age cohort. And I have been publicly speaking about this since 2007. And it's funny because I'm on the road a lot and talking about millennials a lot. And every time I say to my wife, I'm finally going to come to a group, a business, a community, and they're going to say, please sit down and shut up because we know all about this one already. And the answer is they never do it because they don't. And so that's why I'm going to add a little bit of color to what you already know about millennials. And then I am going to segue into the new work about tribes and why I believe that's the direction beyond demographics where we need to go in order to understand who we are and who others are. But first, let's talk about millennials. We're talking about a very important group in this country alone, just by size alone. So there were 78 million of us baby boomers, and so much was made out of us because we were the largest age cohort ever. And so we didn't just live through the passages of life, we redefined every passage of life. We redefined kindergarten, we redefined adolescence, redefined middle age, and so on. We were rebellious in nature. But there are already 82 million American millennials. So it's already the largest age cohort ever, and it's still growing. So millennials are a group I tag, or first globals, born in 1979 through 1997. That makes them 18 to 36, almost 37 years of age, and still growing. Because we're talking about an age cohort and not an age group. And that's an important definition of terms that I think everybody needs to understand. An age group is where you are at in the life cycle. And so very simply, there are commonalities among all 20-somethings, and too often I think the criticism of millennials comes from this misunderstanding of them as mainly 20-somethings. What's a 20-something? Well, go back multiple generations. I'm concerned about me and how I look and my relationship and what I wear and is it cool and is he the one or is she the one or whatever. It's all about me. I know this for a fact because I happened to find, going through my mother's effects a few years ago, letters that I wrote home from college to my mother. Now, like the papal seal, these letters will never be seen by anyone because I was so annoying and so self-centered, and that's enough. But the point is, then you move into your 30s and you've defined a relationship, maybe defined a piece of property, maybe you've settled into a career. There's some stability and a future that you can identify with. You become a bit more community-oriented, family-oriented, move into your 40s. You know the drill, 40s and 50s. But that is the life cycle. And those are age groups. But an age cohort is when history invades the lives of young people and helps to define a set of values that those young people not only treat as sacrosanct, but will carry with them the rest of their lives. Perfect story. When I was a freshman, my favorite professor, Dr. Kenny, economic history, was a World War II veteran. And he used to regale us with these stories. This is now the late 60s. And actually all the faculty, were in some way tied to World War II. But Dr. Kenny told us, he said, we were just a bunch of guys, Saturday night, December 6th, 1941, sitting in a dorm talking about girls and beer and sports and that sort of thing. But he said, you know what? 6:45, Monday morning, December 8th, we were all lined up outside selective service. We couldn't wait to sign up to defend the honor of our country, which had been attacked the day before at Pearl Harbor. Point being, they became the greatest generation, but they weren't born the greatest generation. Boomers, same sort of thing. We are an age cohort. Why? Well, there were so many of us and so much was made out of us. But what defined our world was television. Wars had been fought before, but no one ever saw them. And civil rights was not born in the late 1950s and early 60s, but no one ever saw it on television. We did. And here we were steeped in schools in the 1950s and the 60s during the Cold War. Very simple world. Us, them, good, bad, moral, immoral. It was all so simple then. And then television. Now we see civil rights demonstrators being hosed just for trying to ride a bus or sit at a lunch counter or to demonstrate. We see police dogs turned on them. We see actual people getting shot and killed on television in Vietnam. And now our world is not so simple. Now, at the same time, we boomers have our own headquarters. We're the largest age cohort to go to college. And we become a rebellious sort. And we carry that rebellion with us into our old age, despite our politics. In between us, a very much smaller group. I call them Nikes. Generation X, 1964 to 1978. Very small group in comparison to the others. Born into an America that's falling apart, and they see it. I mean, from day one, political assassinations, race riots in every city in the country. Losing our first war as a country. No longer in control the American century, but we can't control commodities. Oil shoots up, and for those of us who remember it, it was meat, and it was coffee, and it was sugar. Out of control. Our lives are out of control. When boomers were kids, every kid pretty much had a mom and a dad at home. Dad went out to work, earned enough. Mom stayed home, ran the home front. There was stability. No one ever even talked about, but do they love each other? No, that was immaterial. It was stability. Now in the 1970s, these Generation X Nikes are witnessing for the first time 1/3 of marriages falling because of divorce, 40% as we move on into the 70s. Whole different kind of world. They're the most libertarian of age cohorts because they don't trust any major institution. Why? Because all those institutions let them down. They've had to just go out and do it. Hence the Nikes. So now we get into millennials. What's the one word that defines this age cohort? Technology. Not just technology, because that goes back to the wheel, but ever-changing technology and the need to learn it, to master it, to teach it, and then relearn it, and remaster it, and reteach it. To drive home from the store after a new electronic and find that what you just bought is already obsolete, and you have to go out and get something new and master it and learn it. Your world is changing. And so let me describe for you the changing world of millennials, and it starts right in the Zogby home, let alone the Zogby data, because I'm the dad of 3 sons, 37, 35, and almost 33. So I'm like some of you remember the Hair Club for Men commercials, right? Yeah. I'm the president of the club and a client, okay? So what am I watching here? I'm watching, for starters, MTV. And I see it evolve from 24 hours of the most annoying music videos imaginable into MTV News. And what's on the news? kids all over the world wearing the same clothes, listening to the same music, playing the same sports. Who are our kids? They are the first age cohort in the United States that will play more soccer than baseball or football. See where I'm coming from? We're developing global citizenry. And as they're looking at other kids, black, white, yellow, brown, there's a reduced sense of something that all the rest of us have grown up with, which is the other. There's very little, next to no sense of the other. And it's not only because of what they see, it's also because of who they are. Because even if you look at older millennials down to younger millennials, let me just trace this for you. I'm a boomer. 81% of my age cohort is white. So my kids are older millennials, and 61% of their age cohort is white. My little Minnie, my 3-year-old tomorrow, granddaughter, is in an age cohort that's 48% white. So there's a less of a sense of other as well, because they are the other. They are each other. That's so different. Let's move forward. Now it's beyond MTV News and it's the internet. No more chasing out to libraries. It's all that information is right at home on the desktop computer. I remember 1996, I was polling for Reuters, the presidential election. And I used to be so anxious to see how did the Reuters wire pick up the coverage of my poll. And so I'd get home like around 6 o'clock, and I'd go upstairs to the desktop and I'd click on AOL, and then I'd go downstairs and have dinner and maybe a walk, and then out to see a movie, and then come back. Oh, there it is. The little circle is stopped. But by now, the turn of the century, it is as we predicted, the whole world in the palm of their hands. All knowledge in the palm of their hands. And they're chasing it, and it's available to them. And I learned the value of global citizenry quite unexpectedly in a series of polls that I conducted for the Foreign Policy Association in New York after 9/11, 2002, 2003, 2004. And I thought in this round of polling that what I was going to see was, after 9/11, this young age cohort responding the same way that Dr. Kenny's age cohort had, turning inward and saying America had been attacked, we have to defend its honor. And instead, there was some of that, to be sure. But for the most part, what young people were saying was, I don't get it. I'm puzzled. These are people just like me. What happened? Who did something wrong? Why? They turned not inward, but turned outward because it puzzled them. It went so contrary to the world and the sense that they had of their age cohort. So we keep moving fast forward. And what do we find? The development of global citizenry. So number one, 66% of millennials have an active passport and have traveled abroad. And you should know that's the entire age cohort. It cuts across income, cuts across geography, cuts across urban, rural, cuts across levels of education. Obviously, the more educated, the higher income, the more privileged, more. But it doesn't shut out people because of race or income or educational level achieved. The world is the playing field. When I wrote my first book, The Way Will Be, and the chapter on millennials, stunned people because at that point, 2007, 2008, 23% of millennials said, I expect, not hope or wish, I expect to live and work in a foreign capital at some point in my life. That is now 46% of millennials. 46%, almost half, expect to live and work in a foreign capital. 17% say it is very likely that I and either my spouse or significant other will live on two different continents while we are together. 16% say it is very likely that we will raise a child as we're living on two different continents. These questions wouldn't have even been asked. There's no pool for this kind of question. 62% of millennials say it is essential that I master a foreign language or be fluent in a foreign language in order to pursue my career. That many are not studying or mastering foreign languages. But again, the sensibility is there. And the question being asked that was never asked before, because the assumption by Americans was always very simple. You want to do business with me? Learn English. 85%, these numbers keep growing, of millennials say, I want to leave this world a better place because of something that I did. 76% say, I want to work for an entity that affords me that opportunity to contribute, either by volunteering or by contributing in some way. All of these numbers are dramatically higher than every other age cohort. In fact, they're not even close. So what are we talking about in terms of management, in terms of the workplace? These are the sorts of things I hear. Oh, these kids, they're not 9 to 5. They're not 9 to 5. They're 7 and 24. They have to be on. You know, I've asked them over the years, do you have someone in your social network who is from? And then I list. The lowest percentage I get is the 31% who identify with someone in sub-Saharan Africa is in their social network. You can only imagine Europe, China, even the Middle East and Latin America, numbers that are dramatically higher. They're plugged in. When we ask, is American culture inherently superior to the culture of? And when my first book came out, millennials were the only ones who were in the 40 percentile, 41, 47%, who said that American culture is inherently superior. Every other group was by far and away a majority that said American culture was inherently superior. Those numbers are now down into the high 20s to mid 30s. There is an appreciation of the rest of the world, so much so that I can tell you that this notion of first globals is worldwide. And that not only is there a desire on the part of American kids to live and work in a foreign capital, there is also a similar desire in varying degrees to young people all over the world. That is a bond that they share. I did a survey, 2006. This was within a month, I should say, after Israel had invaded Lebanon in response to Hezbollah. And a war was going on, and there was deep antipathy towards the United States and towards Israel, higher than usual. And we did a survey of, quote, the young Arab leaders. mainly in the Gulf area, but it was pan-Arab. And these are young professionals, graduate and college students, and we ask them, more than family, aside from family, what do you value most? My career. What do you need in order to further your career? The best skills available. How would you get those best skills? By doing internships. From this list of countries, where are you most likely to get those best skills? The United States of America. Who is your hero in the Arab world today? Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. Ain't that something? What else about them? When they come in, there is more of a modesty than there has been before. I was an employer. Can you tell me how I get to be COO of Zogby International, say in the next 2 years? Sure, stab me in the parking lot. That's the fast track. I have options, you know. Well, the Great Recession, of course, was a great leveler. If you're 31, 32 years old today, you don't know a world without a recession and a slowed economy and some degree of pessimism. These kids, and I can get away with saying that, these kids are in the midst of what we call the gig economy. You've heard that term. Alan Blinder coined it a number of years ago, but today's 20-somethings will have had 4 gigs by the age of 30 and 10 by the age of 40. They live less in a world of permanence and more in a world that is ephemeral. And so for them as well as employers, there is no, and there can be no sense of permanence and permanent expectations. Those that can will go on to a better gig and a better opportunity. Those that have to struggle have to say, look, at the end of this 6 months or the end of this stint, where's my next opportunity? And how do I handle that next opportunity? I have to reinvent myself. I tell them, they come to me in droves. I meet in small groups. I serve as a mentor. I talk on the phone to people, young people all over the country, and I say, what are you doing right now? And they'll tell me. What's the next opportunity? Well, there's a few possibilities. How are you lining up that next possibility by redefining what you're doing now? In other words, what are you doing right now that can be tweaked and made relevant to what you want to do next? It's no longer the permanent resume. And what is it? What's the message? It's not the 3.8, because that puts you in the pile this big of everybody that got 3.8s. Sorry, those of you that got 3.8s. There's a lot of you out there. Yours has to go into the pile that says, I was a camp counselor, but I resolved a conflict. I was a part of a solution. I worked on teams, and incidentally, millennials prefer teams than they do individual achievement. Very importantly, they don't want to be captain of the team. They want the rest of the team to speak glowingly about them. That is the value. I turn that upside down when they say, oh, everybody got a trophy? Little Johnny, you sucked out there, Johnny. But here's your giant trophy. But it worked because that's what they value and that's what makes them so different. This is worldwide. I see it in the Arab world. I polled the Tunisian elections for the General Assembly. What an astounding experience. 24 focus groups among young people. They all took out, I made this revolution happen. Not in Bourguiba Square. It can't hold that many people. I made this revolution happen. And in almost every one of the focus groups, do you know what they said to me? What are the American kids saying? Do they think we're cool? That's kind of awesome. There is this global bonding of global citizenry. So, enough about millennials. How much time do I have? We're going to do Q&A, so about 10 minutes. Okay. So, I have discovered that we need to move beyond demographics in order to understand who people are. I mean, what is a millennial? Is it LeBron James? Is it Chelsea Clinton? Is it Lindsay Lohan? Is it the young Latina who works at Walmart? Is it the young African American? Or is it the young whatever? Baby boomers. Look at baby boomers, and yeah, there are some shared values to be sure, but there are boomers that are voting for Donald Trump and boomers that are voting who feel the burn. Who's the real boomer? And so what I've discovered is that because of technology, people are actually reorganizing themselves into communities of self-interest and principally identifying with people who share commonalities, common values. This is 6 years of research. This is not one survey. These are surveys of thousands of people. And I call the process tribal analytics because what I did from the start is I surveyed a few thousand people, open-ended questions. What motto defines your life? What are the two major life-changing events? Which brand really tells your story? Questions like that. 21 questions, open-ended, 3,000 people, and my sons and I went through them all the hard way. No high-tech story here. You got to read what people are saying. And so we came up with, what would you name your tribe was one of the questions. And we began to see from there a settlement into patterns, so that by the next round of surveys, we then tested the tribes and tested the attributes, tested the common behaviors and the brands, and we were able to, on one hand, lock into about 11 or 12 tribes, but then also with subsequent surveys and the same, within margins of error, the same patterns of these tribes emerging, then add color to them by now asking them, is it Home Depot or is it Lowe's? Is it McDonald's or is it Burger King or Wendy's or Shake Shack? If you fantasized about where you would be living, what would it be? A Mediterranean villa, a home in Bel Air, a penthouse in New York, or where you're living right now? What kind of car would you be driving? Lots of questions. And so we've come up with permanent tribes, and then there are emerging tribes as well. So real quickly, who are some of the tribes? They're happy hedonists. Eat, drink, and be merry. And incidentally, just as you might guess, about 60% of them are under 50, but 40% of them are over 50. There's the God Squad. Faith in God above all. God defines my life in every way, even in my language, my motto, how I choose products. And this isn't a Christian thing. It's Christian and it's Muslim and it's Jewish and it's none of the above, non-denominational. There are the persistents. They're the ones I find the most interesting of all, I have to tell you, because I learned in doing the open-ended survey, when we ask people what two events defined your life, I was just stunned by the numbers of people that brought up a personal tragedy. Losing my spouse at an early age, an auto accident where I lost a limb, the death of my child, my divorce that I've never gotten over. And the persistents are the ones that triumph. They're the ones that say, of course these are cliches, but they wouldn't be cliches if they weren't true, right? Live one day at a time. Take it as it comes. Do your best. Never give up. There's the one true path. Another one of my favorites. These are mainly young Christian conservatives, but not knee-jerk conservatives. They're the ones who tell us, I'm deeply concerned about man's stewardship of God's earth, the environment. I'm worried about global warming. I'm deeply concerned about global poverty. I'm concerned about my community, and I volunteer in my community. This is not your grandfather's social conservative. They're telling their pastors or imams, look, I get all the other stuff. I just don't want to talk about it anymore. I have other priorities. There are the creators. There are the outsiders. The outsiders are the people that you went to college with who played cards all day long. They are the Lenny Bruce, Richard Pryor, George Carlin wannabes. They're the hoop dreamers of comedy. Except, number one, they're not funny. And number two, they've never made it. We ask each tribe what bonds you together, and the outsiders are the ones that say absolutely nothing bonds us together. They're the self-perfectionists. Self-perfectionists are, as I describe in the book, you're not going to want to invite a self-perfectionist over for a game of canasta. They're deeply concerned about themselves to the borderline of being narcissistic. And this is them telling us this. Imagine. But they say, what gives you the greatest comfort? Being alone, even if it means being alone in a room filled with others. So, why is this all important? Because whether you're in HR or in management or just trying to connect with other people, I've created, I hope, a whole new conversation and a whole new product that helps you identify more of yourself or more of your employees beyond any simplistic characteristics. I'd only end by saying one of the most fascinating parts of this process is what I call global border crossings. Whereas 13% of happy hedonists identify with the attributes of the God Squad. Now, how? Well, many of them say that their faith in God is important. Hey, we had a happy hedonist president of the United States. Dick Morris used to talk about, there was Saturday Night Bill and Sunday Morning Bill. I rest my case. Thank you very, very much.
time for a few questions, and if I could ask you to identify yourself as you ask your question. I don't think you have to remember which tribe you might belong to, but just your name and your organization would be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
I'm Sonia Greer, and I'm in the Kogat School of Business here at American University. And that was a very interesting presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wondered, coming off of our two panels this morning, thinking about cultural competence, I'm wondering if you saw within your data the fact that there are sort of still traditional demographic groups who have different experiences in the marketplace, whether we're talking about healthcare or shopping experiences, African Americans in the U.S. or Muslims or North Africans in France tend to have different experiences. Did you see that come up in any kind of intersectional way within these different tribes that you've talked about, where of the same age cohort have different experiences and that affects the way they
Yeah, very good question. I mean, to be honest with you, if a group tends to be younger, it's going to have a certain tendency. Like happy hedonists are younger. The adventurists, who I didn't mention, are younger. And there's a big difference, incidentally, between adventurists and happy hedonists, both seeking new things and new places, but in different ways. But the commonality was really the shared interest. Now, what are the favorite stores? And the way I asked the question was, if there was only one big box store left, which one of these would you prefer? Number one was Target, incidentally. And that, interestingly, dipped for a while and then came right back up. It dipped after the credit card problem. But, yeah, not surprisingly, the land of the free, is the largest of the group, and those are secular conservatives as opposed to God Squad conservatives. Those were Sears shoppers. But to be sure, we had about 15% of the land of the free who were 18 to 30 years of age. And so that's why I thought that the tribes are a very good guide, because they kind of cut across age identification. Dean?
Thanks. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Wonderful,
And coming from
very
you,
interesting.
that's going to be on my website. Thanks.
Thank you. When I hear the term tribe, it evokes in me images that we've spent a lot of time in history working with and also against.
Mm-hmm.
The tribes immediately conjure conflict and misunderstanding, one tribe fighting another tribe. Is there anything that's inherent or inevitable in these new tribes that gives us hope that the reaction to tribal conflict could be different this time
Oh, man, what a setup question.
than the last time?
Thank you for asking that, because the title of the book, which I came up with after it was done, is We Are Many, We Are One. And so there's a whole chapter on why these tribes are unique. Then there's a whole chapter on the border crossings and the commonalities shared between tribes. And then an entire chapter on for professionals. Everything from the healthcare industry to higher education to state and local government, et cetera, who you're looking for and how best to reach them. And there's also a chapter on politics, which is if you want to build a coalition, and frankly, nobody's out there building a coalition right now. Everybody is targeting their base, and it's very disturbing to watch it. But here's what I would tell the Democratic candidate, here's what I would tell the Republican candidate, and here's what I would tell the independent candidate in terms of who are more likely to go with you and what are the common messages that you can achieve. We're doing a project right now with Ogilvy Mather, who I've worked with now for about 3 years in developing this. But we're doing a project right now, and we're 2/3 of the way through it. But what we've identified now is that tribes actually can be more important in cultural marketing than race. And so you can save your client hell of a lot of money by not producing the Hispanic ad, the African American ad, the Muslim ad, that there are common messages on the basis of identifying your tribe. So there's hope. Now there has to be will. Yeah. Don't forget to buy the book.
I was going to say, I can't wait to buy the book, and as somebody who started out his career in anthropology, it gives a whole new meaning to the word tribes, as Dean explained, though. But I do have a question for you, because I don't know how many different tribes you described, but inclusion is not only about grouping people to manage and deal with them in constructed ways, but it's also about embracing the extremes. So what were the outliers that most surprised you that didn't get into the book that we should be aware of as well?
Thank you for that mean-spirited question. No, there are some radical differences. I mean, they are tribes for a reason. So if I want to change hats and look at those differences, there is a God Squad in a land of the free who are very, very hard-edged and who are prejudiced in many, many ways, who include fewer people. Now, the God Squad has a substantial number. One of the growing ethnic groups are in this country, greatly growing, are Christian conservative Latinos, and there are Christian conservative African Americans, as well, and so they're represented in these two very conservative tribes, but there's no common language, and both of these tribes are hetero. At least that's what they told us. And that's a difference unto itself. Whereas you get to happy hedonists and you're getting to 13% who identify as LGBTQ. So those are some of... Now, in all honesty, two different people can read this book. And one can say, I found my tribe and I found our tribe, and that's who I'm going to target. And someone else can say, oh, here's a way, there's some commonality here, and here's some common language. Yes, one here, and then all the way in the back, sure.
Thank you for your presentation. I do plan to purchase your book.
Your polling numbers.
All right, then I will purchase multiple copies. I just was wondering, in looking at the I'm going to call them tribal identities.
Yep.
How do you address multiple cultural / tribal identities within the context of your work?
We asked people to identify with two different tribes. What two tribes they most identified with. That's why it was really fascinating to me, number one, to find those border crossings just by virtue of their identification, but then also to line up the attributes. Oh, sure. Do I have to say all that all over again? No. But also, to identify the attributes, that there are, in fact, say, some shared values between happy hedonists and God Squad. between the land of the free, who are the more secular conservatives, and the dutifuls. The dutifuls are John McCain type conservatives. Duty, honor, responsibility, my family above everything else. There are similarities between the go with the flow, those are the more Zen-like folks, and the creators who are more creative. They're not in any way, shape, or form identical, but there's enough of crossover to make it really interesting.
So they got to choose two.
Yes.
Yes, I'm Riaz Naqshbandi from Kogad School of Business. Actually, I am energized with this fantastic conference and fantastic lunch, especially the sweets. What you mentioned is fascinating, but my question to you, could you speak a little bit more on the impact of what you just mentioned on the management of companies in terms of compensation, workplace, competition, and all of the above? And thank you. It is an honor to have you here.
Well, thank you. Thanks for the kind words. Well, look, for starters, we operate from this premise. The 13 most dangerous words are, we're going to continue to do things here the way we've always done them. That's our premise. You can't anymore. And so here's an option. As you bring in new employees, new hires, new customers as well, as you consider compensation packages and benefits, travel time, the opportunity to volunteer, the opportunity to participate in your larger world, you're going to have to put a premium on knowing your people and knowing your pool. And I don't think it's sufficient anymore to take a resume that says American University, graduate in IT or MBA or whatever. You want to get to know them a bit more. The competition's steep, and you have your needs, and there are some people who are a better fit. Hey, how many times, and forgive me for this, how many times do you see the perfect resume and not realize there's an a-hole behind that resume? Raise your hands. We've all seen that. They worked at Zogby International for years. Their boss was one. But that's my point. Without getting specific, a new tool, a new set of eyes, in other words. And honestly, a work in progress, because all of us really are trying to steer new paths. And I think that's what makes us makes this an exciting time. One is, do not turn on cable news. That's injurious to your health. And the other is that we're all struggling to find the next and better ways of knowing who we are.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking John, and I'll be the Vanna White to John Zogby and wave the book. We do have some copies in the back for sale, so unfortunately I don't know that you have time to sign all of them, but it is now 22.
Oh, I've got 15.
Okay, great. Then we have a little bit of time. But before we go to that, we have Heidi Rowe, who would like to make a special presentation. Please come.
Hi. I'm going to stand aside from the podium so I don't get drowned by it. Thank you, Mr. Zogby, for your inspirational speech on tribal analytics. I look forward to reading my own copy when I get home. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm the program coordinator of IMI. My name is Heidi Rowe. I was brought on this Friday, February. Is this mic working? So I am, by all means, the baby of the team. Not only do I work for American University, I also attend it. I am a master's student at the School of International Service. And coincidentally, in my advanced political statistics analysis class, I read a couple of your polling researches. And it was truly amazing how data that we collect can actually predict the future. So my first day in the IMI office with Haley, she hands me our draft agenda, and it says John Zogby, and I look down at it, and I'm like, no way. I couldn't believe the impressive list of speakers that were coming to our conference. And every day that I came into work, I was amazed by the diversity and the passion that came through in conversation, but also just by reading your biographies. You inspire all the millennials and all the students that are here with us today. And so I thank you, and I thank you, Mr. Zogby, and on behalf of the Intercultural Management Institute, the School of Professional and Extended Study, and as a first global myself, we would like to present you with a token of our gratitude. Thank you. Thank you for speaking.
Thank you very much, Heidi. This for the
So, wow.
Thank you so much. I have to tell you this. When my middle son, Ben, was 10, I coached his Little League team. And the team was sponsored by, up in upstate New York, Great American Food Stores. And so we did win the championship. And I have a trophy at home, as does Ben. Mine says, John Zogby, Great American. So this adds to it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I have to say that as an educator, you leave us frightened down to our toes about how the heck are we going to do our job with the next generations coming on. But thank you so much for the insight. We appreciate it. We have a bit of a break, one, to continue the conversation. We have books to purchase. John will be sitting in the back there signing copies. And then we reconvene in Ward, which room is it? Maria? Which room do we convene in?
We go back into the auditorium.
Back to the auditorium in Ward Hall across the quad, if you weren't there this morning. And for our afternoon panel on cultural competency questions and communities. So please join us there. Thank you.